Earlier this year, Kate Warner-Elliott and I had the pleasure of driving the BMW i5 M60, a relatively new model for BMW that, frankly, blew us away with its ease of driving, its fun responsiveness, and its overall road manners. Today, though, while Kate's on holiday in the UK,
what is luxury?
I'm putting the i4 M50 to the test. Now, we've driven a BMW i4 on this channel before, but that was a rear-wheel drive variant and we weren't all that impressed. This time though, this is an all-wheel drive variant with 400 kilowatts at the wheels and a pretty ludicrous sprint time. But it's a smaller car. It's based on an older chassis and platform. And does it really have the chops to blow us away, just like the i5 did? Let's find out.
There's something in the water, I feel it taking over me. It's slowly getting harder to breathe, to breathe, to breathe, to breathe. And I don't know what's happening, how did it come to this? I saw danger.
This is BMW's most powerful i4 variant. This has 400 kilowatts from two motors, one for the front axle, one for the rear, 586 pound-feet of torque, which is about 795 Newton meters. And it will get you from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.7 seconds. The 0 to 100 kilometer per hour is 3.9 seconds. While this is the most powerful and expensive BMW i4 variant you can get, the entry-level version of this, if that makes sense, the one without any of the option boxes ticked, and I'll talk about that later, starts at just under 70,000 US, which puts it in a similar price bracket to a reasonably well-spec'd Kia EV6 GT. And on paper, the two are pretty comparable. They're a similar size, they have a similar amount of acceleration capabilities. The EV6 GT will charge more quickly and has a little less luxury behind it. This, of course, like the rest of the i4 family, is based on the BMW 3 Series chassis. It is effectively a 4 Series Grand Coupe with that sweeping, glorious back end. And I'm going to be honest, this car is a good-looking car, especially in this very beautiful paint that we've got here. It's like a purple paint job. It actually looks blue. I think it's officially a purple. It looks glorious. It has a presence on the road that says, hey, I'm a classic, iconic BMW, get out of my way. Driving this car on a divided lane highway like this, or in fact on a freeway, is a really pleasant experience. The car prefers the feel of very smooth tarmac, and if you can find smooth tarmac, it feels like it just glides along. It loves long straightaways, it's got tons of torque, and you can just open it up at any moment like that. And it really just gives you all the beans, no matter what. It just goes. When you drive this in Sport Boost, which is basically the most performance oriented tune of this car's drivetrain that you can select, it does feel like you're driving a race inspired car. There's a fake engine noise that sounds like a growling engine, and yes, it does sound synthesized, and I'm not a super fan of it, but I can understand why BMW did it. BMW wants this car to attract 3 and 4 Series M Performance Badge fans. And I think that acceleration, that growl, I think that's going to do it. Like the BMW i5 M60 we drove a couple of weeks ago, this vehicle is so customizable in its head-up display and in its digital screens. Obviously, the driver's display can be tweaked in any number of different ways. I've currently got it set up to have navigation. Interestingly, unlike the i5 M60, which had the option of having this augmented reality camera in front of you, you can't have that, at least in this variant. I don't believe it's even available as an option. You also don't get a lot of the other fancier tech that you find in the i5 M60, such as the gesture-based control to get the car to do certain things. Now we're driving over the St. John's Bridge here in Portland. I'm going to exit the Sport Boost mode, which is accessible through an extra button on the touchscreen display, and I'm going to go into the comfort mode. That makes this car behave much more like a regular daily driver. It uses the rear wheel drive motor much more than the front wheel drive. As with the other modes, while this does have a front wheel drive motor to help for all wheel drive traction, this car definitely has a bias towards the rear, which is something that BMW has always favoured. And this does drive like a rear wheel drive dominant or biased car. Around town though, comfort mode is much nicer, and you can select the amount of regenerative braking that the car has by going into the touchscreen display here and making some modifications. You need to go into vehicle, then you need to go into driving settings, then you need to go into drivetrain and chassis, then you can actually change your energy recovery. Adaptive, high, medium, or low. I prefer it to high, which will give you a much more traditional lift-off regen feeling that you might find in other EVs. But I should note, in default mode, this car does keep creep on, which can get a little old. Driven around town in eco or comfort mode, this car is really sensibly behaved. It's not a pain to drive, but you're still very cognizant that you have quite a large amount of power at your disposal if you need it. But the thing that does make itself known again and again and again is the suspension. And if you are someone who prefers a more comfortable ride, this is not the car for you. Even in its most comfort-oriented mode, it's still quite harsh. Now, that might be the fact that this particular car has the larger, fancier wheels, and as we all know, the larger the wheels, the less comfortable the ride becomes, because the profile of the tyre changes to accommodate that larger wheel size. And it also affects the range depending on where you live and what version of the car you buy. Your range could vary pretty greatly. In Europe, this car is rated to 510 kilometers on the WLTP test cycle. That is 316 miles. And look, I have never seen 316 miles indicated on this car. The best I've seen in the time that I've had it, which is just 1 week, is about 225 miles, which means it has a similar range to my partner's 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV in the real world. The difference is that this car has an 84 kilowatt hour battery pack and our Chevrolet Bolt EV has a 62 kilowatt hour battery pack. To be fair to BMW though, unlike many automakers who just give one range quote, it posts kind of a range of different figures depending on what specs you pick for your vehicle and, most importantly, what wheel sizes you have. At the high end, according to the US EPA test cycle, this vehicle can do about 267 miles per charge, which is 429 kilometers. That is less than the WLTP test cycle range quotes, but let's be honest, the WLTP test cycle isn't very representative of the real world for most people. At the other end though, you're going to see anything as low as 227 miles, according to EPA test cycles for when this car is in its least efficient guise. That's about 365 kilometers. That means that while you might think this is a vehicle built for long distance driving, and it certainly seems most comfortable on the freeway, you're going to be stopping a lot to recharge. That said, BMW claims that you can add 100 miles of range in optimum conditions in just 9 minutes at a suitable DC fast charging station. I haven't seen that quick a fast charging experience yet, but that might be because the weather's been kind of warm here in Oregon over the last week or so, and so I suspect that has impacted how quickly vehicles can charge, if not because the car is throttling it, but rather, I suspect, because the charging stations are throttling the charge speed to prevent themselves from overheating. I've talked a little bit about in-car tech. You had a very clear, customizable driver dash here, and then you've got the touchscreen display here. Of course, BMW loves its special jog wheel, and if you prefer to enter things letter by joggling the wheel down here, you can still do that, but luckily BMW does now have touchscreen access for those who prefer it. The other thing I should note here is that this variant of the i4 M50 does have the optional head-up display. It's very clear, it's very crisp, and I can see it with polarized glasses on, which means they have oriented it in a way that allows most sunglass wearers to be able to see it without cocking their head at a funny angle, which is not always the case with all vehicles I've driven. Being a BMW and keeping in line with the BMW philosophy of offering you a base model that you can then add optional extras to, pretty much everything in the interior can be tweaked in some way or another. When you build this car, it starts off with Sensatec leather as standard, and there are different colored trim options you can pick in Sensatec synthetic leather that won't cost you anything extra. And if you are someone who would prefer to have an animal-based interior, you can buy it, although BMW will charge you an arm and a leg for it. BMW will also charge you a significant amount of money, think well over $1,000, for a carbon fiber interior like we've got here, and then things like heated and cooled seats, heated steering wheel are all extra, as are a lot of the software assistance features that you might want in a modern EV, such as your lane keep assist, your semi-autonomous driver assistance features. They are all extra. Obviously, that allows BMW to price the entry-level version of the i4 M50 at about $70,000 US. But if you opt for different wheels, you opt for different paint, you add extra things inside, that price soon goes up. And as I'm driving it today, this car is an eye-watering $87,500 US. That's more than I paid for my F-150 Lightning pickup truck. How comfortable you will feel in this car, I think, will depend a little bit on your age and also your level of fitness. I am definitely at the middle-aged, looks good on paper, not so much in practice. This car is pretty low down, like every other BMW 3 and 4 Series variant. And if you are someone who has joint issues or any kind of mobility issues, you may struggle to get in this vehicle. This car has really large sills on the doors, both front and rear. And once you're in the car, it's not so bad. Even in the rear seats, there's plenty of headroom and you have a decent amount of room as long as you're not sitting behind a very tall person or you are in fact a tall person yourself. But getting in and out, well, it's not necessarily the most pleasant experience if, like me, you are middle-aged, a tad overweight, and you have a bum knee from a motorbike accident. But once you're in, you do have a pretty good seating position. And while the seat is not something that I would want to spend a lot of time in, say, for a long-distance trip, for a daily commute, I could get used to it. I've told you a little bit about what this car offers on paper. Now let's talk about how that applies in the real world. Given this vehicle's performance chops, so the M Performance suspension package, the all-wheel drivetrain with 400 kilowatts, and a near 50-50 weight distribution, you might think that this would be a car that would be really enjoyable to blat around country lanes like I'm driving right now. But the reality is that the suspension on this car is so harsh, even in its comfort setting, that it all too easily can make you feel nauseous. As a rule, I don't suffer from motion sickness all that much. Sure, if I am in a vehicle and I'm in the passenger seat and I'm not looking at the road ahead and we're doing a road like this, I can become motion sick pretty easily. But normally if I'm driving, I don't have any issues. And there have been a handful of vehicles in my career that have managed to make me feel nauseous while I've been driving them. The Porsche Taycan, the first time I got behind the wheel of that, I drove it too harshly on a road I didn't know, and I definitely made myself feel a little motion sick. The same thing when I first tried out the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT Performance. That was another vehicle that made me feel really quite nauseous. This is effectively the third. So for this reason, I feel that this car is better suited to track day life than it might be driving down country roads. Yes, it's taking care of this country road right now. I'm certainly traveling at a slightly slower speed than I might do in other vehicles. And even now, I can just feel in the back of my stomach that start of that nauseous feeling, which is unusual when driving, but definitely here in this vehicle. And I'm not sure if it's the smells in the cabin or the driving position, but I suspect really what's going on is it's my body's reaction to a steering setup that feels a little slow and not necessarily as precise as you might expect from a BMW. While I really enjoyed driving the i5 M60 a few weeks back, I have not enjoyed driving this vehicle. On twisty roads, it just doesn't have the suspension set up to make you feel like you can enjoy yourself. And while you do have an inordinate amount of power underneath your right foot, and the brakes on this car are like none other I've tried, it really will stop the car in a very, very quick amount of time. The rest, well, it's unpleasant. I suspect on a racetrack where you have lots of space and you have lots of room to wind this car up to its maximum top speed, and you have enough space to really enjoy that sprint time, all of that torque, and also those phenomenal carbon brakes, you wouldn't have quite as much of an issue. But honestly, right now, I would prefer to be on a freeway driving this car. And I like twisty roads. I talk about them again and again and again. But this time, I can't wait to drop down onto Highway 30, which is a couple of miles that away. Michael and I have been talking a fair bit about this car. Kate's off on vacation right now, so she hasn't had a chance to drive it. So it's just been Michael and I spending most of our time behind the wheel this week. And we've both had that same reaction of, this is a car with great potential, but something just doesn't feel right. We're both not sure if it's the seat. The seat is not the most comfortable seat I've sat in. And unlike the seats in, say, the Ford Mustang Mach-E Rally or the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT, which cocoon you and support you in all the right ways, this car's seat seems to poke you in all the wrong ways. It's not particularly comfortable. This variant of the seat, as we have it in this car, is not cooled, and it gets incredibly hot. This is actually leather rather than the synthetic leather option that you can spec. And it just, well, it's not a comfortable seat. It might be that the car is still reasonably new. I mean, it only has a couple of thousand miles on the clock. But at the same point, I'm still not loving it. So, okay, I don't like the suspension. I'm not a fan of the steering. The way that you can just squeeze the go pedal and get that power is nice, but if you give it full beans, the front end does lift up just a little bit, much less than it did on the rear-wheel drive variant, and you do get that little bit of a C-like experience. Right now, though, the frustration on this corner is I don't always necessarily know where the wheels are, which is unusual for a BMW. When Kate and I drove the i5 M60, it was nothing like this vehicle. It was well organized, it was well behaved. When you went into a corner, you had confidence that you would come out of that corner with a reasonable amount of everything in order. Right now, not so much. I am pushing this car to a limit that I feel comfortable with, and Michael is behind me in a Chevrolet Bolt and is keeping up with me. I'm not pushing this car to its physical limits, I'm pushing it to my limits. But let's talk about one thing that I think is good about this vehicle, and I'm going to highlight it on this road here. And that is the fact that visibility is really good from the front of the vehicle. Unlike a lot of EVs on the marketplace today, which seem to have really massive A-pillars, there's not a lot of blind spots going on at the front of the vehicle. And yes, look, this is a Grand Coupe. It's not necessarily a body style that's going to be great at the rear for visibility, and there are some blind spots, but I can certainly see out of it. And the mirrors are a sensible size for the vehicle, which means I'm actually aware of what's going on behind me. And of course, I do like a good pair of hips. And when I look out the window of this car, I do see some lovely ones. I think you can probably see, based on how I'm jostled around and how I'm reacting to this car, that it's not a fan of this slightly rough, uneven road. But I will say that one thing I do like about this car is that the brakes are very linear. And if you like the race car feel, you're gonna like the braking performance of this car. I am now starting to feel sick. Yeah, I'm starting to feel sick now. If you want to get the best out of the brakes in this car though, you really do need to treat them as if you are driving a race car. The brakes are very responsive, they don't require a lot of pressure. They are quite consistent in their pressure though throughout the travel of the piston. And if you are too harsh on the brakes, if you reach for that brake pedal too quickly, you will end up with a very, very jerky experience. The other thing I want to note about the brake pedal here is that the brake pedal is closer to me than the accelerator is. And so in order to activate the switch between accelerator and brake, you kind of have to lift your leg up a little bit and then move your foot over, which feels a little unnatural for me. I haven't found a position where my foot feels completely comfortable with it. But I should note, if you just watched me rattle and bump my way down the mountain pass, that was in Eco Pro, which is supposed to be one of the most efficient operating modes that this vehicle has, and also, I guess, one of the more comfort-oriented versions. But you could see that it was anything but comfortable. I have never driven a car before that has felt like it should always be driven on the Autobahn. This is such a vehicle. This car is a conundrum, wrapped up in an enigma. It looks stunning from every angle. And in a world where everyone else is making very similar boxy SUVs, this is a car that stands out. It stands out against the Tesla Model 3 Performance. If you put both of these two cars side by side, I can guarantee you that among true petrol heads, this car will be the head turner. Among EV fans though, there's something missing. This is a car that can go very fast in a straight line. It's a car that can be blistering on the track. I mean, you only have to look at its stance, look at the specs of the suspension, look at the way you sit behind the wheel. This is a car built for the Autobahn, for the track, for the Nurburgring Nordschleife. This is not a car built for commuting, although it's perfectly capable of it. It's got the comfort mode. If you want to take your mum somewhere, you want to take your grandparents somewhere, it could do that at a pinch. Getting in and out is a bit of a contortionist speciality. If you are slightly older like I am, if you are creaky in some way or another, you're gonna feel it getting in and out of this vehicle. In fact, once I get behind the wheel of this car, I don't want to get out until I've reached my destination, which, because of this car's inefficiency in the drivetrain, is not going to be as long as you might hope. On paper, depending on where you are, BMW says anything from 300 miles range in Europe to just over 200 in the US if you have these monster wheels fitted. I think a real world range driving this, the way it eggs you to, you're going to be looking at closer to 180. It doesn't have the 800 volt drivetrain capabilities of the Kia EV6 GT, so it's not going to charge anywhere near as quickly on the open road. And yes, this car looks better than the EV6 GT, at least if you're looking for classic German design. But which one is more fun to drive? The EV6 GT every single day, because this car reminds you at every turn that it's an expensive sports car with lots of extra options you can add, with lots of technology you can opt to pick. But you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be BMW expensive to keep on the road. The EV6 GT, that feels like a track day car, a car that you can drive to work Monday to Friday and then spank at the weekend before stopping off at a rapid charger on the way home to benefit from that 800 volt charging technology before then heading off. And the other thing to bear in mind is that this is built on a shared chassis platform. This is a 3 Series underneath. A 3 Series that was never really designed, honestly, truly, to be an electric car. Sure, BMW's engineers have worked wizardry with this vehicle. 50-50 weight distribution, very, very flat in the corners, very minimal body roll, brakes that will stop on a literal dime. But that's the thing, this vehicle always feels like I should be sitting in a 4-point harness with a crash helmet on, with a hand system attached to my crash helmet. It almost feels like an insult to the BMW M badge, to the BMW racing heritage, to put this much power in a beautiful car and then expect you to drive it to a corporate parking lot every day where it's going to sit baking in the sun for 10 hours before being driven home in rush hour traffic and never getting to unleash what this car is capable of. BMW, I want you to take this car. I want you to never stop making it lighter until it is a fraction of its current weight. I want you to replace all of the exterior body panels with super lightweight carbon fiber. I want you to gut the inside. I want you to put a race spec roll cage in. Then give me 2 decent racing seats, or maybe just one, a 4-point harness. And then this car, I think, would be a true demon. This car, on paper, could be the basis of a new race series. BMW racing is legendary. Imagine this as its own club package. Look, I understand. Not everyone wants a Tesla Model 3 performance these days. Not everyone wants the Kia EV6 GT. But if you have 70 grand in the bank and those 2 other models are not something that interests you, please, for the love of all that is sacred and holy in the world, if you're gonna buy one of these, make sure you've got a racing license to go with it. And I promise to take this to the track multiple times a month. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of more than the 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure we can be 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There are a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Biggs Bronson, Philip Panya, Stephen Trudeau, Laura Connolly, Paul Giblin, Kaboombox, Oliver, John Franks, Bill Lascelle, Brent Smith, Terry and Rich UK, Wendy Kelly Budenbaum, Joe Hamlin, Ilian Oster, Brian Curry, Chelsea Williams, and Adekunle Ferinya. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member and get your moment of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at, address also below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below. This month, we're talking about accessibility with our latest t-shirt design, and keep your eyes peeled for a brand new special t-shirt for our trip to Everything Electric in Canada next month. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we think that this one is also well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!